Welcome to the Live Like Eden podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay, and I'm thrilled that you're here. Years ago, out of nowhere, I found myself in a radical shift in consciousness that took me over 20 years to fully wrap my head around. Yes, that's right. It took me a long time, and without any warning, down the rabbit hole of darkness I went. Now I'm here to share with you all the insights of awakening, spirituality, health, the energetic world we're living in, and my absolute favorite topic, just how crazy the ego mind can be. These subjects are designed to help you understand the awakening process, to open your mind, and prepare you for your own unique spiritual journey toward inner peace. So I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy today's discussion. Before we get started with today's show, I want to share with you something I've been working on. I have created a quiz just for you to see where you are on your own unique spiritual path. Everybody loves a quiz, right? You can go to my website at livelikeeden.com, click on the quiz pop-up, and answer 10 quick questions. You'll get an immediate response emailed to you with your results, a personalized podcast playlist including 5 Live Like Eden episodes that will offer you assistance where you currently are. And I've also thrown in a few bonus episodes that you'll receive a few days later. If you're a spiritual junkie, you're in the midst of awakening, or you're simply curious where you might be in your own spiritual process, check it out and feel free to share with your friends who might be interested too. Welcome back to another episode, everybody. I hope you enjoyed last week's conversation with Brooke Deanne. If you didn't get a chance to listen to it, I recommend going and checking it out. She was a survivor of a religious cult, suffered from abusive relationships, and then completely changed her life. It's a real testament to the human spirit and just very inspiring if any of you are dealing with anything abusive or traumatic in your life. It's always nice to hear from someone who's overcome it, that it's possible to change your life and change everything about it. Sometimes when we get into situations that are difficult, we often think we're never going to get over it. Right? This is so common. Sometimes you think it's going to stay that way forever. In that conversation, we started touching on taking your power back, and it's inspiring this show today, which is just a nice follow-up from the last episode about how it's possible to rediscover the spiritual power that's sitting within you. And so today I want to devote this entire show to taking your power back and the silent conditioning of the mind. It's this unknowing conditioning of the mind that's been happening since the day we were born. When you think about this world, it's a world of external distraction. Everything we do is about the outside, right? Most everything we do has to do with external situations. So our mind is constantly on the external, and we are most often reacting to anything going on around us. We spend most of our lives in this reactionary state until there's something within you, this spark that ignites within you, that begins to wake up from the fact that you believe you're in a reactionary state and you realize there's something more. I don't have to be reacting to everything that happens in this world. I don't have to grab a hold of it. I actually have the ability to decide, to make a decision, how I'm going to look at any given situation, if I'm going to just react without thinking, or if I'm going to see it from a completely different perspective. This is the wake-up call to a whole new life. I want to start the first half of this show talking about how our minds are conditioned from day one, so we can begin to understand how we got into this situation in the first place, right? It's always important to look, observe, and then there's the transformative process that happens where you take a step out, you're understanding why it is the way it is, and then you can choose a different way. You actually begin to see it, and not only do you see it, you understand it. It makes sense now. So I'm going to break down the show with beginning about the conditioning of the mind, all the areas that are most common in the world where we're conditioned, literally from birth. And then I want to talk about intuition, your true power and spiritual knowing that's sitting within you, how this drives our life, how this intuitive system is often overlooked, hijacked, lost. It's really a powerful tool to take your power back. So let's talk about intuition. Lastly, we're going to look at waking up from the conditioned mind, how the process begins with looking at your identity and sort of redefining yourself in the world. Then we'll look a little bit deeper into the spiritual self with the capital S. And finally, I'll end the show with 10 questions that are just personally for you to ask yourself that will help you see past the conditioning. They'll help you inquire within your own mind. There's no right or wrong answer. These are just questions to help you. We're all on our own personal, unique journey in life, and we're all going to have our own unique way of waking up to our greater self and taking our power back. And when I speak of power, I'm speaking of it not from the mental perspective, the power of the mind. I'm speaking of it from a much deeper place, the spiritual power, this essence and knowingness that can be our guide throughout our entire life. But first, we have to see how we've been living, right, before we can get there. Typically, unless you're lucky and have some spontaneous event and all of a sudden you're awake and you had no trouble in the process. But I think that's very rare. Very, very rare. We've been so conditioned that it's sort of this slow process of waking up. And then one day you go, well, thank God it's slow, because I think I would have been a mess had that happened overnight. Going from one extreme to the next can be so incredibly shocking that you don't even know what to do with yourself. So be grateful for the process that plays out for you. So let's get started with this conditioning of the mind and looking at it specifically in our youth. It starts from day one. The second you're born into the world, the conditioning process, unbeknownst to you, is happening. And rightfully so. You're a tiny baby. You can't do anything for yourself yet. So you have parents or some sort of guardian that's looking after you. As a parent, for those of you that have children, you know how important this moment is. You want to do everything in your power to make sure you raise your child to be a decent human being, right? At least most parents. Most parents are looking for their kids to just grow up and live a good life. And from day one, the parents or the guardians, whomever is looking after you, is influencing you in some way, shape, or form in your life. You don't even know this is happening. So all of the adults around you, whatever their beliefs, thoughts, traditions, preferences, faith, all of these things play a role in influencing you. As a child, you trust the authority. You trust that your parents are doing the best that they can, or looking out for you and loving you and want the best for you. As a small child, you are immediately handing over your power to the authority figure that is taking care of you. And this is just a very natural, normal part of the world. There's really nothing you can do about it. As a baby and as a child, you are in the care of your guardian, whether you like it or not, whether that situation is going well or not. Children often seem powerless because of this. So from day one, without even knowing it, you're absorbing everything around you, taking it in, taking how you are raised in. And depending on the family that you're in, you're going to have a different experience than your neighbor, right? Everyone's got their own beliefs and the way that they live, their own personal lifestyle, that they're going to instill on the child. I always like to think that parents, given that I've been around a lot of them, I have 4 children, a lot of parents, at least in my own observation, want their children to be just little images of them, it seems like. I've noticed this a lot, where if you did something as a child, you want to make sure that your child is involved in that same thing. It's almost like some parents are reliving their childhood through their children and putting an expectation on those kids to do what they did. Well, I went here, your grandfather went here. For generations, we've all done this. You're doing it. You know what I'm talking about. Again, well, that's what everybody did, so that's what you're going to do. If any of you listening were raised like that, you know what I'm talking about. There's no choice for the child in most situations. Now, maybe there's more of it today where people are starting to wake up a little, listen to the child, But not always. A lot of times it's just an authoritative dictatorship. A lot of parents are just dictate, this is what you're doing. And as a kid, you don't really have a lot of say in it until you get older. So immediately you're born into a situation where you're influenced, impacted, and conditioned to believe certain things. You're also immediately tossed into a schooling system of some kind. Public school, private schools, charter schools, home schools, it doesn't matter. In this society, children must go to school. In many cases, this is a law. Like you have to report that your children are attending a school or a homeschool or some sort of education. However, it doesn't matter what school you attend, you are going to be influenced with whatever school you're at. That's just life. You have no idea if the teacher is telling you the truth, if the books you're reading are true. You have no idea as a child. You just go, you're told to read this, take a test, pass the test, and now you're on to the next grade level. Without knowing it, in this situation, your power is handed over to the school system, to the teacher, to whomever put the curriculum in place. You must do these things. You have questions about it? Too bad. This is how it works. And teachers can be incredibly influential to children. There's wonderful, wonderful teachers out there who inspire and motivate and make children want to learn something, want to learn how to use their own power. There's wonderful teachers. And then there's some not so hot teachers, the teachers that sit there and expect the child to do it all. My kids have told me stories about some teachers where I was like, what in the world? You can't ask a question. Isn't that the teacher's job to answer questions? I don't understand this. Too bad. Look it up. I mean, crazy stuff I've heard. So immediately you have the family, you have the school system conditioning you to believe certain things. And just depends on where you are. Again, you had no say in what school you go to. You just assume that everything you're learning is accurate and it's well-intentioned. Really, as a small child, you don't even question any of that. Now, some of you may recall questioning things as a small child, even inside of you, like there was this inner knowing or question burning in your mind, yet you may not have voiced your question, but you just felt like something was off or you wanted to ask the question, but there's such a power over you that this is the way it is. You're worried that other kids may laugh at you for questioning something, right? Then there's that whole pressure from other people, but there's something in you that's going, oh, I don't know about that. I really want to ask that question. Do you remember that as a child in any situation? It doesn't have to be school. It could be anything where you were just questioning and something did not resonate within you, but you were forced to go along with it. Because again, as a young child, you don't really have much of a choice. Another area where you're influenced is through friendships. You meet somebody you like. You meet a group of people you like. And you want to fit in with that group. You really like them. So you start acting like them. You start talking like them. And this happens at any age. I mean, even adults do this. You want to dress like that person. You like the way that crowd talks. You like the way those people act. They're the fun group. That's the popular crowd. Here's the smart kids. There's the athletes. There's the theater crew. Fitting in for kids is big. A lot of kids really want to feel like they belong somewhere or that people will be nice to them. That's another thing. Children are not nice to each other. They're just not. It's like kids can be mean. Whether you are in a large group of kids or you just have one really good friend, you can be influenced by that person. You might even start to become each other. And then you're creating a group identity without really knowing who you are as an individual. Again, being conditioned by other people, wanting to feel part of something larger. The ego is at play here already, right? Wanting to feel important and special. That is the ego's number one trait, that idea of specialness, that I'm separate and special. And you can see it right away with children and friend groups. It's huge. Social groups and friendships are huge. They make a huge impact on us, whether we realize it or not. Again, it's this sort of unknowing conditioning. That's why I call it the silent conditioning. You don't even know that it's happening until you wake up one day and go, oh my God, who am I? I have been living all of these other people's lives. My friends, my school, my family, what everyone else thinks I should be, and I have no idea who I am or what I should be in this world. I've adopted everything else, and I've handed my power over to everyone else. And in a sense, now I feel powerless. Another one of the biggest conditioning factors in the world is faith and religion. However you were raised, if your parents were religious people, and it could be any type of religion, it doesn't matter. If they instilled what they believe onto you and wanted you to be raised that way, they're doing it because they believe it, right? They have the best interest in their hearts for you. And because they believe it, they want you to believe it too. I mean, this is just how it works. They expect you to follow their faith, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, you're Muslim, you're Buddhist, you're agnostic, whatever beliefs that you have about God is going to be shared with you. So if you're raised in a religious manner, you go to religious school, everything is about religion, you're going to grow up in that, either believing it or not, right? A lot of people do, and it works for them. If your parents are religious and you go to church and you're very involved with your faith, you will be conditioned to believe whatever the faith that you follow believes. For example, Brooke, the woman that I interviewed last episode, was raised in the Jehovah's Witnesses cult, that she calls it. As a child, she said, I didn't question it. My parents were raised in that. Their parents were raised in it. I was raised in it. I believed it all. So it doesn't matter what belief system it is. If you're raised in this manner and you're told something over and over and over again, the probability is high that you will believe it. It's just like if somebody tells a lie over and over and over and over again, they eventually believe it. It's like repetition over time. You just keep driving home these main principles over and over and over. And most people will believe whatever it is that they're told. In this case, we're talking about religion. Whatever you believe about God, whatever you believe about the Bible, whatever you believe about Jesus, whatever you believe about the rules of the church or the 10 Commandments. There's so much involved in religion. You may have been a child who didn't grow up with any religion. So you don't have an opinion on religion whatsoever. Unless your parents didn't like religion, then because they didn't like religion, you may have been taught that you shouldn't like religion either. There's the other side of it, right? The people who don't want anything to do with religion. They probably don't want their children involved with religion either. What I'm getting at with this whole thing is, as a kid, you are basically at the mercy of whatever your parents want you to do. Think back to your own childhood and look at all the things that you did and how much of it was what you wanted and how much of it was what your parents wanted you to do. How much of it did you love? How much of it did you hate? How much of it did you believe? How much of it did you question? Did you question any of it? Did you have any personal thought about it at all, or did you just go along and everything was fine? Or did you question it all and couldn't wait to get out on your own, right? There's so many different experiences people have as children. No matter what experience you had, you were put into a certain lifestyle. And lifestyle choices are huge. What was the lifestyle of your family that you grew up in? What was it like? Were you in a family that was active, that was up and going and moving? You get up, you eat breakfast, everything's prepared, you're off to school, you have lunch, you're off to your activities. We all eat dinner together. Here's how to eat healthy. Your parents are telling you this is what you need to eat. I mean, think of all the levels of lifestyle that you're conditioned as a child. From the food you eat, from the level of exercise that you get, from whatever your parents believe about anything in the world, from the things we just talked about, like education, religion, politics, anything worldly, No matter what, you are absorbing all of this information. And for most of us, it's 18 years at least, right, of being conditioned. 18 years, that's a long time. Lifestyle choices make a huge difference in your life. And if you're growing up in a household where the lifestyle choices are not so hot, not everybody grows up in a house where the lifestyle's going well. There's many people who are involved in addictive behaviors. Many kids grow up with drug addicted and alcoholic parents, parents who argue all the time. There's never a perfect environment. But the environment that you grew up in, the lifestyle choices that were made in that home, make a huge, huge impact on your mind and your belief system and your thoughts, how you see the world, how you were treated. All of these things are conditioning you. If you had a rough childhood and you were treated poorly, you're going to think the world is a bad place, not to trust anybody. Things don't go well for you. So you're guarded. You're already guarded. Those of you that had a fabulous childhood and everything was wonderful all the time have a different version of the world. Your perspective is that everything's great. Your experience has molded you, and most of it has been from a reactionary state of mind where your power was unknowingly handed over to the authority figures around you. The authority figures at home, the authority figures at school, the authority figures at church, or any other mentor, coach, anyone that has been involved in your life. After looking at all the ways, and there are more, but these are just the very simple ways that we are conditioned from a very, very young age. And these experiences, whether they were good or bad, will play a role in how we believe. They just do. The one thing that tends to happen with small children is the intuition. This strong intuitive knowing that you have from day one gets shut down. I want you to think about for one moment here as we transition into speaking about intuition. Do you recall the first moment in your life where you noticed your intuition? You recognized that there was some inner knowing about something, anything. You knew it. It popped into you immediately and you knew something. You don't even know how you knew it. It just was there. But it's a strong inner communication that we all have. As children, when you have this inner knowing about something, it's often turned off when the authority figure around you tells you it's not possible, tells you something else. And your power, your intuitive knowing, gets silenced. Your power has handed over to that authority figure. How many children talk about seeing ghosts or spirits or all of these things that kids say? And what do most parents say to them? Oh, there's no such thing as ghosts. There's no such thing as anything like that. And so the child immediately gets told they're wrong. That's not what they're experiencing. Even though the adult probably has no clue what the child's really going through. Or what about a small child who says to their parent, Mom, I don't like being around that man. There's something about him I don't like. And mom says, oh, what are you talking about? He's the nicest man. But something inside of you says, that's a warning. I don't like him. I don't know why. Again, your intuition is silenced. Intuition is the most powerful tool any of us can have. It's our true guide. It's something that's sort of inexplainable too. It's not tangible. You can't touch it. You can only know it. And when I say know it, I mean with a capital K. Not knowing of the world, not things of the world or intelligentsia or anything like that, learning things in books. None of that kind of knowing. This is a knowing. It's a wisdom deep within you. That's like a radar. It's your radar system for the world around you. It's like animals before tsunamis that somehow climb to the top of the mountain before the tsunami hits. It's like that, a knowing of something, knowing you should or shouldn't do something. It's a huge power source. And this is the part of you that gets silenced. It gets shut down. And eventually, if it's shut down enough, it becomes lost. And you don't even know that it's there because now you're conditioned, you're living in the reactionary state, and you're listening to the authority around you instead of listening to your own inner wisdom. This is how it happens. And it's sort of a natural process, right? Because as children, we have to have an authority figure. We have to have a guardian. We are not capable yet of living on our own. And the ego does a really good job of setting it up that way, doesn't it? Think about it. What's a better way to come into the world for the ego than to be dependent on someone else so that you start believing that you don't have a spiritual nature inside or an intuitive knowing about everything around you? Very clever of the ego. So if your intuition was unknowingly silenced to you, you might have a difficult time at first learning to listen to yourself, learning to listen to that spiritual guide that is sitting within you. If you're somebody who's always looking outside of yourself for answers, you're going to your parents or you're going to your friends, you're looking online, you're asking a psychologist or a therapist, you're asking everybody else what you should do rather than listen to what you want to do, then it's going to be very difficult at first, not impossible, but difficult to rediscover the intuitive knowing that's sitting within you, taking your power back. Isn't it interesting that we have this inner computer? With all the modern technology out there today, that is really fascinating. I find it fascinating that there are people that have created such interesting and quick ways to communicate. The minds behind all that just blow my mind. All the warnings out there about how technology is bad, and it can be used in a nefarious way. And it is important to look and see if it's in the hands of people that want to control and look at everything you're doing and live in a surveillance state, or is it in the hands of people that want to give you freedom and liberty? But why in the world do we need to spy on everybody? What the hell is that? I don't know about any of you, but is anybody's life really extraordinarily exciting that somebody else would want to spy on it? It's more about control, and technology can absolutely be used nefariously. And I think it's really important to look and see how it's being used, but it can be used for good. There's amazing advancements in technology that are incredible. The computer that's the smartest, the one programming all of these things, is within us. The intuitive knowing. The part of us, the essence that has access to this larger mind, this larger field of awareness. I mean, where do you think these people who are so smart are getting all their information? People go, well, it's their brain. I'm like, really? Is our consciousness really in the brain? Or are we just accessing information from our intuition, our own computer? And some people are just in direct communication with it, receiving information, listening to the guidance within you. Intuition is the source of your power. And this is where, as children, it's been silenced because we're handing over authority naturally to other people that are looking out for us. In most cases, are literally looking out for our best interest. However, as we get older and we start growing up and becoming our own person, and we're old enough to go out into the world, you may start wondering, who am I? If you begin to wake up from all the conditioning that's around you, you're going to start questioning now your identity in the world. Am I all of these things? Do I believe all of these things I was told and taught? You might answer, yes, I do, in some cases, and no, I don't in others. You might believe all of it. It might really resonate with you, and that is your identity, and it's something that you're comfortable with in the world. For other people, they may have been raised in a way that didn't agree with them. And now they're questioning everything about their life. And this is the awakening process. You're questioning everything about what you thought you were, what you thought you believed, the traditions that you might have been raised in. All of these things come up. And the very first thing that will happen as you decondition the mind and you begin to take your power back and then eventually go deeper, deeper, and deeper to recognizing the true self with a capital S, is you will begin to question who you are as an individual in the world. You will begin to question your own personal identity in the world. This is a nice place to start. We're starting on the surface, right? As you start looking at your own personal individual self again and what you believe, you're going to notice now how you're impacted every single day of your life. Everywhere you go, everything you see, everything you listen to, everyone you talk to, the art of persuasion is there. You're being persuaded all over the place. You go to the store, buy this, it's on a discount. You go to another place, somebody's harassing you, trying to sell you something. My husband and I were at a store this weekend. We went to Cabela's, and we got cornered in the back by this lady trying to sell us a vacation package. My husband has a gift card, just wants to buy some stuff. And we're back there for 20 minutes as she's trying to influence us to buy a 3 to 4 day weekend for $200. Great deal. I don't want to stay at that hotel. It's everywhere. The level of impact and influence surrounding you is all over the place. From advertising, media, 24/7 news stories, breaking news stories, fear tactics all over the place. Do you hear these commercials where people are selling you that the world is ending? I listened to an ad on YouTube that was talking about the end times, Revelation is here, the second coming of Christ, this whole thing in the Bible that is their interpretation of that story. There are others, but this particular interpretation is that we're at end times. I thought we were at end times in 2012. Remember that? The whole end of times because of the Mayan calendar ended and suddenly the world's going to end. This happens all the time. People are always saying the world's ending. What's going to happen in the awakening process is your identity is going to have its world end. That's what's going to happen. I'm not so sure about the physical world around you, but the more you think about it, was that book of Revelation more about the internal experience of waking up to our truth in God? Just food for thought as we're talking about that. Just notice the next time you go anywhere and look at all of the ways that you could be influenced, impacted, to believe something, to buy something, to think a certain way, to behave in a certain way. I mean, it is everywhere because we're living in a very stimulating world where everyone around you has an agenda, especially in this world of consumerism. It's everywhere. Or have you ever been talking to a friend or your parent or someone and you share something you're doing and they immediately question you, like, why are you doing that? And then all of a sudden, what are you doing? Questioning yourself, aren't you? Again, you see how this works? I mean, it's just simple things every day that can really make a difference and take your power. If somebody questions what you're doing, you typically start questioning yourself, like, am I doing it wrong? But people who are 100% certain of themselves and what they are doing don't have that experience as much. They don't care about if somebody questions them or what the other person thinks. In fact, they might even welcome it. Awakening from the conditioned mind will start on this level, where you just start noticing it in your surface life, everything on the surface. This is where it starts. Eventually, as you go deeper, you will get pulled and pulled and pulled even further to that self-discovery with a capital S, the real essence within you, where the intuition will start really shining brightly. You will start feeling even, and I mean this, you will feel it almost like a rebirthing within you that rises up and the awareness becomes so large you can't ignore it anymore. And then your search no longer is solely concerned with your identification and how you operate in the world and how you take your power back as an individual in the world, but it then is shifted into discovering the power you have spiritually as a spiritual being. That there's something much larger going on in all of this. There is so much more happening than just what our eyes are seeing. There's a communication going on underneath the surface. There's a guidance system that we all have built within. It's always been there. It's just eroded over time through the process. And as you grow up, and if you're interested or something goes off in you where you're questioning this whole thing, or you have an experience that takes you here, then everything gets flipped upside down, doesn't it? Then everything looks totally different. The world seems completely different. You're now realizing that I can choose to believe whatever I want. I can choose to do whatever I think is right. I can listen to the intuition that is sitting within me. And this is taking your power back. Listening. Clearing your mind of thought and listening to your internal guidance system. You can begin to understand how all of this happens. How easy it is to be conditioned in this world. And it's not only easy to be conditioned as a child. People are conditioned all the time as adults. And some people unknowingly stay conditioned the rest of their life. They don't know it's happening. It's kind of like the Matrix, right? They don't know it. But they're living here and they're living their lives and everything's going along however it goes. When you start to wake up and see things differently is when you start to know that it's all been a conditioning process. And then you have new eyes, right? You have clearer vision. And even though you're never going to avoid being conditioned, because it's happening every day, you can at least see it differently. You can at least now question it. You can at least say, what do I think about that? Is that true? What do I know about that? Do I believe that? What is it that I think about it without being influenced by anyone else? That's a difficult thing to do in this world, this crazy, nonstop stimulating world where everything's coming at you like dodgeball. I want to leave you today with 10 questions just for you. Ask yourself, be honest with yourself, that will help you to see past the conditioning that has occurred for all of us, whether we like it or not. Number 1, think about this. Without any outside influence, what do you truly believe? What is it that you believe about anything in the world, about anything beyond the world? What is it that you believe without any other influence? Not your spouse, not your kids, not your friends, not your coworkers, not the television, none of it. You can think about this and explore as many topics as you want to. So that's a big question because you could go into a million different subjects. But it's good to ask, what do I think about anything? If you're somebody who's always given your power over to somebody else and believe because someone else told you to believe it, this might be a little challenging. You might say, I don't know. I actually don't know what I think of that. Number 2, do you really believe this, whatever subject you're looking at? Or do I believe it because I was told this? Someone taught me this. I learned this at school. My parents taught me this. So do you really believe it? Or is it something you're simply regurgitating because you saw it somewhere? You did no background investigation into any of it, but you saw it over and over and over. Like maybe you saw a headline. By the way, headlines are usually not true because it's clickbait. They want you to click so you read it. They get more views. 9 times out of 10, those are misleading, but they get you to click, don't they? So do you believe it because you just saw something? Because you were told that? Really analyze it because it's a great thing to start looking at. And then you'll start doing it all the time. Number 3, how often do you rely on other people's opinions? How often do you rely on other people's input or advice for you to do something, as opposed to listening to your own intuition? How often do you do something because somebody else wants you to do it? But maybe you don't really want to do that. So you're handing over your power right away. Well, they want me to do it, so I'm going to go along to get along. There's a lot of that out there. I'm going to go along to get along to just keep the peace. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. There isn't. But know what you're doing, especially if it's something you strongly oppose. I mean, it's one thing if you don't really have an opinion, but it's another thing if you really oppose it, but you just don't want to go there. And sometimes it's okay to just keep the peace, right? It's not worth your time and it's not worth the argument. But when does that become an issue for you, right? If it's something that's recurring all the time, maybe that's something to look at. Number 4, how do you know if the information you're looking at, whether it's books, television, research you're doing on any given subject, how do you know it's true? Do you check the sources? And then is that even possible? How do you even know if the source is accurate? When people are all up in arms over fact checking, I get a kick out of fact checking. I know there's people out there who want the fact checkers to check. My question is this: who are the fact checkers? And who's overseeing the fact checkers? Facts are funny. How do we know it's a fact? Where is this information coming from? What are your sources? Are your sources tainted? Is there propaganda involved? I mean, it's endless. The questions are endless. Number 5. How much meaning do you place on important things in your life? And does the meaning change over time? Is meaning subjective to you, or is there an objective meaning in the collective? Is meaning created by the mind, or is there absolute truth in this world? Now, these are deeper questions. These are debatable questions, but they're questions for you. Again, like I said earlier in the beginning, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just for you to think. It's your own path inward. How can you ever know that the meaning that you place on something is true? How do we know that? If meaning can change, is there absolute truth there? And that's something to really dive into and think about how you place meaning on things in your own life. Number 6, do you hear your own intuition? Do you listen to it? Do you ignore it? And then go back to the question that I asked earlier about intuition is, do you remember the first time you heard your own inner voice? And then recall, if you can remember it, what was that like? What was the experience like? And then if you were shut down on your intuition, were you able to act on your intuition or not? Was it something that you were able to use and utilize, or was it shut down? And if it were shut down, notice in the experience that you're recalling, were you handing over your power to someone else, to another authority figure around you, and your intuition was not heard? Number 7, if you've been used to handing over your power to outside authorities, was your initial intuition on the subject, or your initial intuition on any experience you were in, was it accurate or not? Like, even if you couldn't express or act on your own intuition, was the intuitive knowledge that you received correct? I don't know about any of you, but I've had many experiences in my life where I go, oh, my initial intuition was this and it was spot on. But I either couldn't do anything about that intuition or I completely ignored it. I recently watched a docuseries on Hulu that was over the top wild. Several years ago in the United States, there was a woman that was supposedly abducted. Her face was all over the media. They couldn't find her. They were looking all over the place. No trace of her anywhere. Come to find out, this woman staged her abduction. Crazy, right? I guess what you'll do for attention. I don't know. Anyway, it was a really interesting, upsetting story for the family involved. Her husband, who was worried sick that she was missing. He's imagining horrible things happening to her or that she's possibly dead. When she was discovered again, when she was sitting in the hospital awaiting to see him, he said that his initial reaction to seeing her was that she was lying. But then he saw her and she was full of all of these bruises and it looked like she'd been through a living hell. So he ignored his intuition, and of course he was there for his wife. She looked like she'd been seriously abused. But his initial intuition was spot on. And later on in the documentary, you see where he discovered that she was completely lying, and she admitted to it and served time in jail. Anyway, what I'm getting at is even in the worst situations, in situations that seem horrific, your intuitive knowledge is spot on. And in this particular case, his intuition was telling him, I don't buy it. Even though he's looking at his battered wife, who was apparently abducted. Like, can you imagine you are seeing this situation, but there's something in you that's not resonating? I like to describe this. Intuition is knowing, and when the vibration that you're around is not matching the knowing, is when there's a discrepancy. So when someone is telling you something, but you're not feeling it vibrationally, you're going to feel a discrepancy in your field. It's like saying, I'm not believing what you're telling me, and you don't have evidence for it either. That's the other problematic part. You have no evidence. Your intuition is your intangible evidence. But in this world, you need solid proof, right? And then there's this whole thing. That's what I'm getting at. There's a discrepancy in the field around you. If you're wondering a little bit more about how that works, like how could something that looks horrible, how could you not believe it? He's picking up the energetic field of her, and because she was lying, he's picking it up. He's receiving it in his field. His computer system is picking it up. Now, it's really fascinating. Just to recap, that question number 7 was about if your intuition was not listened to, was it accurate? Number 8, are you ready in your life right now to trust your inner wisdom? Are you ready to explore the real power that's sitting within you? Are you ready to transition into something completely different and take your power back? Ask yourself that. Am I really ready for this? Am I ready to stop relying on outside sources and rely on my inward source, my internal source? Number 9, when you have truly started listening, okay, to your internal guide, to your intuitive system, your spiritual power, what kind of a connection have you formed with this larger awareness? Is it a connection that you have all the time? Is it a connection that you tap into periodically? Are you setting aside time to kind of clear your head, clear your mind, and clear your thought so that you feel this essence and power rise within you? You could think of it as creating a bond with your inner guide. You know, if you've seen the movie Avatar, when they get on those flying dragons, I even forget what they're called. And they like make the bond with the tail, and it's kind of weird, but they do it. And then all of a sudden there's this shared energetic experience where they feel this connection with each other, and now they trust in each other. You can think of it like that. And I'm not literally suggesting you take your tail, and do all that, but it's kind of just a visual, like an inner connection that you have. And maybe there's a visual you can create for yourself where you're just like plugging in. Sometimes I think of it as I'm plugging into the outlet, like connect. Lastly, number 10, when you've created this shift for yourself where you're starting to take your power back and you're really committed to going within yourself, can you feel the difference between handing your power over to the external and shifting it back to yourself inside of you? Can you feel that shift? What does that feel like to you? This is an important question to ask yourself. What does it feel like to you when you make that shift? What did you feel like before? when you're handing power over to other people and other authorities? And now what does it feel like when you trust your intuition? Because my guess is these two are very different feelings. Do you feel better or worse? And how has this changed your life? So these are questions that you can ask anytime to kind of see how you're doing. How is it that I'm experiencing the world around me? Am I allowing the conditioning to take over? Or am I going within myself and allowing my spiritual intuition and wisdom to guide me? There is a choice, and it's always available to you. Even in situations where it seems like you have no power, there's always power to see a different way inside of you. It doesn't mean that the external environment is going to look any different, but what it is doing is giving you the opportunity to connect to that power source that's not going anywhere. It's always going to be there. So if you want to explore a little bit more within yourself, check out the blog post. Again, I'll link it in the show notes for you, and you can ask those questions anytime, especially if you're struggling with handing your power over to everyone else. So thanks so much for tuning in today, learning how to take your power back and discovering the true essence that's sitting within you. That's the whole mission of this podcast all the time, is to give you the strength and the tools to discover that essence that's sitting within you. That'll wrap up today's show. Until next time, I invite you to check out my website at livelikeeden.com. You can sign up for a weekly email reminder when my new podcast and blog comes out, which is every Wednesday. If you are struggling with your own awakening process and you need further assistance or guidance, you can also sign up for a free consult, and I would be more than happy to work with you. If you're enjoying the show, I ask that you share it with others that you think it might benefit. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.